You know, gimmicks are like opinions. Everyone's got one, and they're all valid. Except for the ones that I don't like. But you know, that's not why we're here today. No, we're here to talk about what we feel are the greatest gimmicks of all time.
Oh yeah, there are tons of great gimmicks. This is going to be a hard one. We could do Hollywood Hogan, Ministry Undertaker, Mankind, The Rock. There's so many ones to talk about.
Prime, what are you talking about? We're a Pokemon channel. Why would we be going over wrestling gimmicks? Also, what would a Kabutops even know about the sport?
I'm not a Kabutops. I'm a guy who's in the body of a Kabutops. We've been over this. It's all your fault. My life is like this. It's ruined. It's awful. And it's why I have to wear these comically large oven mitts.
Oh, I thought it was because you didn't want to burn yourself while baking.
Look, I'm sorry if I like wrestling, okay? Let's just focus back on Pokemon.
So yes, Pokemon gimmicks. Everything from the main selling point of a game to an obscure mechanic from spin-offs, we've got all of our favorites right here. I think we've really narrowed it down quite well to the 10 best ones in the franchise. So let us make haste and get on with the list.
Alright, the first gimmick we'll talk about to start our list today was one I felt pretty passionate about including. When you play through Sun and Moon and the Ultra releases, you'll be treated to the most thought Game Freak has ever put into post-game championship shenanigans. As you'll all remember in previous releases, whenever you beat the Elite Four again after initially becoming the champion, you'd end up just having to take on a stronger former champion in a rematch, and that was it. Look, I can enjoy the challenge of taking on Cynthia over and over again as much as the next guy, but I always wanted to have different challengers come after me, and the title that I had legitimately won. In Alola, there are around a dozen people who can show up across the 2 games to challenge you for your title as the champion of the Alola region. You've got everyone from Lusamine to Hao to Ryuki, a mishmash of different challengers that will always keep you on your toes. They sort of did something like this in Sword and Shield, but it's really not the same as this traditional Elite Four challenge into a championship defense. I definitely hope to see them do this again in Scarlet and Violet if the late game goes back to being like older Pokemon games.
In our number 9 spot, we have a gimmick that has taken multiple different forms over the years, being Shadow Pokemon. Now, their first appearance links back to the GameCube's Pokemon Coliseum, but I suppose some could even make the argument that the idea of corrupted Pokemon goes even further back to the Team Rocket TCG set with Dark Pokemon.
Speaking of the TCG, not only did we have Dark Pokemon, but there were Light Pokemon too. The whole concept of corrupted Pokemon led to the creation of Pokemon that are so pure, they couldn't possibly be corrupted. Now, to be fair, the Light Pokemon only appeared in the Neo Destiny set of the TCG, so they definitely didn't get the same amount of traction as Dark Pokemon did. That said, the Pokemon Company made whole sets around the idea of Dark Pokemon, so beyond their first appearances in those spin-off games, this was actually a TCG idea to begin with.
Plus, if we go by the Japanese name for Shadow Pokemon, it's actually Dark Pokemon, so there is that connection. But then Dark Pokemon in the TCG are called Bad Pokemon in Japanese, so then that kind of ruins my argument there.
Man, there are no bad Pokemon, just Pokemon that were put in bad situations.
Well, anyways, if we want to just only talk about the actual term Shadow Pokemon, then we have to take a look at the GameCube games first. Shadow Pokemon were created essentially to be emotionless fighting machines, with the only way to get them back to normal was by purification, or opening the door to their hearts, which is basically just friendship. I find this to be such an interesting gimmick, not just mechanic-wise, but also in the lore of the Pokemon world. I mean, why wouldn't there be Pokemon that have had their hearts turned dark from either bad trainers over the years, or evil people planning to use them for their own nefarious schemes?
Yeah, and quite frankly, I think people might often forget that the idea of Shadow Pokemon isn't a relic of the past. While there haven't been any in the TCG in almost 20 years, or in the main games, they're still making appearances in other spin-offs. We've got Shadow Pokemon running everywhere in Pokemon Go, under the direction of Team Go Rocket. And in Pokken, they introduced Shadow Mewtwo, which was actually corrupted by some crazy stone that got stuck in its shoulder, keeping the spirit of this gimmick alive even in the modern day.
For a theme that's been recurring in the series over the last 20 years or so, it's really interesting that it hasn't shown up in the main series games. Who knows, perhaps Gen 10 might take a crack at this concept, maybe even expanding on it further.
Now, this next gimmick we're going to talk about is actually, well, it almost feels like it's more so the entire point of the game. We agreed upon the catching mechanics as well as the mass outbreaks in Legends Arceus as worth talking about as a top gimmick in the franchise.
Now, while catching has and always will be a core mechanic of Pokemon, Legends Arceus brought it to new heights by having everything being so quick and seamless. Of course, I'm still a big fan of having my wild encounters and weakening the Pokemon to catch them, but there's just something that's so satisfying about sneaking up behind a Pokemon and catching them by surprise, literally. I mean, we see it happen in the anime, not always with the highest rate of success, of course, but it's still something that makes me feel really connected with the world of Legends Arceus.
To tell you the truth, the gimmick part of this that really stands out to me is how they handled mass outbreaks. I can agree the exact way that the game is played can be considered mechanic, but I more so see its mass outbreaks as the true standout gimmick. Being able to head back to the main hub town of Jubilife Village and then venture out knowing exactly where an outbreak is happening, and what to be looking out for when you get there, is awesome, and a lot more consistent than previous mass outbreaks that the series featured. It makes finding shiny Pokemon super easy, but it also puts the controls and mechanics of catching Pokemon at the forefront, so in a way, these two things really go hand in hand.
Absolutely. Now, while these are great things that I think may make people disappointed if they don't reappear in Scarlet and Violet, which I totally understand, but at the same time, it really gave Legends Arceus a unique identity from the rest of the franchise, so I think I'll survive if it stays in the Legends series, assuming Game Freak makes more of them under that moniker.
Quite frankly, I'd be excited to see some of these changes, especially the mass outbreaks in this style, making an appearance in games regardless of whether or not they have the Legends moniker. That said, it's the most recent gimmick the games have offered us, and definitely one of the best.
So the next thing I'd like to talk about was introduced in Pokemon X and Y, being Pokemonomy.
Oh, this is the one that I had to give you. Just go ahead and do this alone.
Yeah, well, you got your Pokemon title defense entry with no interjection from me, so why don't you keep that big bug mouth shut? Anyhow, Pokemonomy and all of its counterparts in Refresh and Camp. This is just something that makes so much sense to have. I mean, with your Pokemon, it's not just a battle win or lose. It's a friends you make and the road you choose. And why wouldn't you choose to play with and feed your Pokemon? I mean, what are you? Some kind of heartless monster that doesn't have any love for the pals that carried you to victory?
I thought I was your Pokemon pal, but you'd rather insult me than play with me.
Yeah, well, playing with you just leaves me in cuts and hurts my feelings. Also, I thought you were just a guy. Why would you want me to play with you, you weirdo? But yes, I don't really think all that much needs to be said about this gimmick. It's one that was just right to introduce once 3D models and expressive animations were a possibility.
Dynamax, boo! I bet I scared you Sword and Shield haters there, didn't I? The whole concept of Dynamaxing and of course Gigantamaxing is a lot more than just Pokemon becoming huge and in some cases changing how they look a bit. We were introduced to our first taste of raid battles in Pokemon, which seemed like something that should have been introduced prior, really, but definitely look like they're here to stay.
You know, one of my favorite parts with the raid battles definitely had to be the loot system they had in place. TRs, EXP candy, and many different kinds of items was just something that felt so great to get after these more difficult encounters.
My personal favorite part of the gimmick itself, though, are the Dynamax adventures that they introduced in the Crown Tundra DLC. That had me going back to Sword and Shield again and again to enjoy a run of raid battles with enhanced shiny odds and a legendary Pokemon winning at the end. While Dynamaxing might as well just be making Pokemon bigger and giving them some stronger moves for 3 turns, the whole gimmick is made worth it when you indulge in the Dynamax adventures.
So entering our top 5 is not really just about the gimmick itself, but rather what it could have turned into, and that's N's Pokemon. So in Black 2 and White 2, if you beat N and Ghetsis in the original games, you could use the Memory Link feature, which allowed you to see N's memories of him releasing the various Pokemon he used in those games. Following this, you had a 1% chance of running into these Pokemon around Unova wherever they may be located. They had their own special animation, and had N listed as their original trainer. Now this is just so cool by itself, but I'd like to think of the possibilities of what they could have done with this idea. I mean, think about it. You connect yourself online, go out into the wild, and bam, you run into a Pokemon that some other trainer, perhaps even people on your friends list, had released. Perhaps something like this could have a boost on friendship, in addition to the EXP boost these Pokemon would have anyways. I don't know, maybe to some people it's just not that amazing, but I personally think that N's Pokemon opened a door to a different kind of special Pokemon, and unfortunately, I think that door is closed for the time being.
Oh, this next one is going to be a good one. It's Mega Evolution. Yes, you heard that right. We are here talking about the 4th spot, and it's Mega Evolution. Not even placing in the top 3. Now see, I love Mega Evolution personally. If you want to look at each game since X and Y having the main big gimmick that they introduce, and it stays pretty synonymous with their generation, well, I think that Mega Evolution is the best of the bunch. I'm talking Z-moves and Dynamax. It's better than both of those, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if I felt it was better than the terrestrial stuff that's going to be happening in Scarlet and Violet. So with Megas, they basically just serve as a change to the stats and appearance of Pokemon, but man, if it ain't cool. It changed the competitive scene majorly for 2 generations and is easily the one gimmick people reference as the one they'd like to see featured in every game. I mean, with each new generation of Pokemon, you can find a dozen videos on YouTube talking about potential new Mega Evolutions for whatever the new releases are.
I mean, when you do something right, people are gonna want more of it. In terms of overall designs, I'm more of a Gigantamax guy myself, but I can't sit here and say that I don't love me a good Mega Evolution.
You just can't really find anything that is as popular as Mega Evolution, it feels like. I know that it's going to be a little controversial that it's only here at number 4, but that's all part of the fun, right?
Well, I certainly hope that our third pick isn't scrutinized by being above Mega Evolutions, but here we go. We have Delta Species. Now, if a lot of you don't know what that is, I really wouldn't blame you. It was a TCG mechanic from about 17 years ago, but it's still one that we both think about often from how cool it was. Delta Species started off with just adding the metal typing to a Pokemon that wouldn't normally have it, with the exception of Metagross, who was given the lightning type to go along with the metal type it already had. But then it turned into something even better, and perhaps was even the inspiration behind another gimmick in the series many years later. We're talking Pokemon with just completely different types altogether. A darkness type Deoxys, a fire type Latios, and even a water type Shiny Mew.
Oh, and by the way, the reverse holo versions of these Delta Species cards are so much cooler than the regular versions. They had the cool stamp of whatever set they were in, and then they made the actual Pokemon holographic instead of the background. It's such a sick idea that they need to come back to.
They're just simply gorgeous all around. Pokemon were not how we knew them to be, and it was just the right kind of shakeup I think most people could get behind. And with Scarlet and Violet giving us this again with the Terastal Phenomenon, I'm really looking forward to seeing just how it turns out this November.
So here we are in our penultimate spot, and let me warn you guys now, the Collector and I went back and forth so much here on just how this was going to play out, but ultimately, his convictions won.
I'll be frank, I do think a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this, but I'm hoping that you'll all hear us out.
So we have Shiny Pokemon here as the second best gimmick that Pokemon has ever given us. They were first introduced in the second generation, and for most people, they got that red Gyarados and were very, very confused. Since then, Shinies have become a bit of a phenomenon that have driven people to spend hours upon hours hunting for their favorites through various methods. I'd go as far as to say that there are several gimmicks within this one gimmick itself, right?
We have the Masuda method, Poke Radar, the Shiny Charm, Chain Fishing, Ultra Wormholes, and Dynamax Adventures and Mass Outbreaks like Prime mentioned earlier. So many methods over the years to help people in their quest of getting these really rare colorations of Pokemon.
It's honestly incredible how intricate this gets, but seriously, think of how much shiny hunting made these games replayable for people. There's probably a couple dozen people on some streaming platform right now when you're watching this video who are streaming themselves hunting shiny Pokemon. For the last 20 plus years, this gimmick has offered players a whole new reason to stick to their games after becoming the champion and completing their Pokedex. And that's why it was so close to being number 1, but it was just beaten out.
But beat out by what? Well, I'm sure there are plenty of you with sharp intuition that could have figured it out as soon as you saw Shinies in the number 2 spot. Undoubtedly though, the number 1 spot for us anyhow has to go to regional variants. There's honestly so much to say about this gimmick, but if you want just one word to describe it, I would have to go with genius. But here's the long version for the rest of you. It's genius because it just makes sense. Just like how animals experience forms of evolution by being introduced to new environments for the sake of survival, why wouldn't Pokemon, who evolve far more drastically, take that same route?
Also, it makes tons of sense for Game Freak to have introduced this concept when they did. We're reaching a point where we're about to be over 1,000 Pokemon. And if in the future they decide that they're done making entirely new Pokemon, they can definitely just lean into making new regional variants. Why do I think that? Well, check out our most recent video prior to this one and find out. Go ahead. I won't blame you for leaving right this second and then coming back to finish this video.
The promotion of your opinions aside, you're very right. Leaning into older favorites and giving them new life in the form of type and design changes is just something that works from a lore, scientific, and smaller Pokedex perspective. But it doesn't just stop there. With Generation 8, we got the best of both worlds in getting regional evolutions. Because why wouldn't these Pokemon with completely different forms go through even more changes and have evolutions exclusive to that version of them? I just love it so much I could honestly go on about it for days. However, instead of hearing about that, you're probably more interested in hearing about why we picked it as the greatest gimmick in all of Pokemon over Shinies.
It took some real convincing for me to be okay with things going this way because I think shiny Pokemon have proven for decades now that they're an important part of the franchise that has really injected life into it. But that said, I understand what the future is, and it's regional variants. They won't be going anywhere and offer a lot more than just a cool palette swap. While shiny Pokemon, regardless of how much easier they've become to get, aren't always going to be available to everyone playing, these regional variants will, and I think in the end, that makes them an even better gimmick: accessibility.
And on top of that, now there's always the door open to your favorite Pokemon getting a fresh coat of paint in a way that will seemingly never change with its actual coat of paint. I mean, look at Meowth fans. They've been absolutely eating for years now. Now look, I get that this is a controversial number 1 spot, but I don't think there are any of you that can argue in good faith that this wasn't one of the most brilliant ideas that Pokemon has ever executed. I, for one, am really looking forward to what new forms and evolutions we get, and not just in Scarlet and Violet, but for all the games that come after.
So, those were the top 10 best Pokemon gimmicks of all time, eh? Considering how many of them that there are, I think we did a pretty good enough job making a comprehensive list of 10. Though as you can imagine, we didn't completely agree on the top 10 to start with. Here on screen, you can see the collectors and my own that we came up with prior to putting this video together.
Aside from the placement, we actually ended up agreeing on most of them, but there were just a few that didn't quite make the cut. Like for me, I really liked Z moves for the big, flashy anime special attacks that they are, as well as the idea of Pokemon fusing together, which is something we've seen so surprisingly little of over the years.
Well, I'll say this much. For the one that didn't make it from my list, the Safari Zone, well, it's been out of sight and out of mind since the 4th generation. And while things have changed to the point where we don't really need to have an area like the Safari Zone anymore, I was still a big fan of it in every incarnation. Even the weird one that they did with Friend Safaris in X and Y. I guess I'll just have to enjoy the new open world and Scarlet and Violet as my own personal Safari Zone now.
But hey, that's enough from us. What are your favorite gimmicks in Pokemon? Did we hit the mark, or were there some really obscure yet cool ones that we overlooked? Tell us all about it down in that there comment section below. With that said, I'm that crazy collector guy.
And I'm a man who was transformed into a Pokemon named the Prime Directive.
And we'll see you all next time.